Hi guys, I'm Rich from Spray Black Studios, and today we're going to have a look at how to improve the immersion in your board games. Many miniature wargamers got themselves into the gaming that they do via board games. Games like Risk and Settlers of Catan, with a strategic element, can quite easily lead into RPGs or into miniature wargaming itself. One of the problems that miniature wargamers can find playing board games, however, is lack of immersion. So when you're used to playing on a big ornate table with beautiful terrain and a beautifully painted army that you've done yourself, it's quite easy to get into the theme of the game. Even though some of the recent games, things like The Captain is Dead, Pandemic, have got brilliantly written rule sets, they don't quite have the immersion of a game of Age of Sigmar or Warhammer 40,000, where you've got a strong theme and some fairly beautiful armies to use. I'm a fairly big Fallout fan, having played the previous games and clocked up a fair few hours, and still am clocking up a fair few hours on Fallout 4. My girlfriend decided that, as we like our board game evenings, she'd pick up the Fallout board game for me. Now, the Fallout board game is a superbly well designed game. While sometimes quite complex, the mechanics of the game are very thematic and very well designed. Aesthetically, the game looks great, and the game aids themselves have been very well produced. My only issue is with the actual playing pieces. Whilst well sculpted, they are still just this very basic tan coloured plastic. Now, if only I knew someone who enjoyed painting minis. So I thought I'd give it a try and get some paint on these figures. Now, I've seen some pretty good paint jobs on the Fallout Wasteland Warfare minis that I've seen online, and these figures aren't too dissimilar in terms of the actual sculpts and in terms of the scale. Maybe not quite as detailed, but we can work with it. So I'm going to give it a try and let's see what comes out. So I think it's only right that I chose the Wanderer as my first to be painted from this box set. The Vault Suit is such an iconic bit of imagery from the Fallout IP, and since this guy is essentially the main character from the games, he is a logical choice. As you can see, the mini is cast as one single piece, already attached to the base. There aren't a huge amount of mould lines present, but first job is to clear up what is there. This plastic's a bit harder than the GW plastic I'm used to, so it takes a little bit more work. Now, since he's on a base, we need to add some texture to it. Application of super glue and a good dunk into some sand will give us a nice, simple and effective texture. To prime this mini, I've used the Chaos Black Rattle Can spray. Gives a nice, fairly even coating. I'm going to start off by painting the Vault Suit, probably the most iconic part of this mini. A couple of thin coats of Latex blue will give us our base coat, and in terms of tone, actually isn't all that far away. I'm now going to thin down some Talisar blue with a bit of contrast medium to form a wash for the material. Being careful not to let the wash pool too much, I'll apply this to all the material on the Vault Suit. This will bring out those shadows and just give it a little bit more depth. To add some highlights in, I'll mix a Latex blue with some Ulthuan grey and use this to pick out the folds, lumps and bumps in the material. The Wanderer has a good amount of metallics on him, with the armour pieces that he's scavenged from various places. So we're going to base all of these with lead belcher. For speed painting jobs, I love lead belcher as it covers great and with just a wash place over the top requires very little else to look effective. For the leather and for the wood, I'll use a base coat of Rhinox hide. This mini's got quite a lot of strapping and various pouches that he'll use to carry all the junk that he finds. For the next step on the leather, I'll mix a Rhinox hide with some Steel Legion drab and layer this over the top, making sure to leave the Rhinox hide in the shadowed areas. This provides us with shadows and our mid-tone for the leather. To add the highlight, I use pure Steel Legion drab on the very edges of the leather. When doing edge highlighting like this, it's very important to thin the paint sufficiently so it is much easier for you to apply. This will allow you to be a lot more accurate with where you're placing those highlights. Now on the leather strap going across his chest, he has some grenades. Using lead belcher, I'll pick these out, and whilst I have the paint out, I'll pop in the metallic areas of the gun as well. As our finisher for the metallic areas, we need a shade. So out comes the obvious choice of liquid talent, the known oil, which I'll apply to the armour plates and metallic areas. Be a little careful not to let it pool too much. For the shade on the leather, however, I'll go with something a bit different. Drakenhof Nightshade works brilliant for this, as it will slightly darken the leather, but also add some blues into the recesses of the leather, which will tie it in nicely to the blue of the vault suit. This will also provide a nice bit of definition to all these leather areas. For the flesh, I'm going to go for a nice warm tone, so I'm going to use a very simplified version of Darren Latham's method. Starting with a base coat of Bugman's Glow, I'm going to layer a couple of thin coats over the head and the hands. To prevent any unwanted texture, make sure you layer down a thin coat and let it dry fully before adding the next coat. For the mid-tone, I'll now mix Bugman's Glow and Cadian Flesh Tone, roughly 50-50, and layer this onto the raised areas of the face and hands, making sure to leave the Bugman's Glow down in the recesses. A little bit of pure Cadian Flesh Tone will really finish this off when applied to areas such as the nose and the upper cheeks, just to pick out that very last highlight. For his eyes, I'll use Corvus Black and Ulthuan Grey. Using an initial layer of black, this will give you a good base to work from. It will give good definition to the eyes themselves. Just make sure you don't go too heavy with this, or it will look like he's wearing eyeliner. A very careful layer of Ulthuan Grey into the middle will give us the whites of the eyes, and then a dot of Corvus Black in the middle will finish him off. A quick little wash of Reikland Flesh Shade will help finish off the skin. I'm just laying this into some of those recessed areas. Now to finish the vault suit, I need to pick out the nice yellow details. Using a couple of coats of Avalon Sunset for this, and then finishing it off with a wash of Reikland Flesh Shade. This will give us this lovely, nice, bright, vibrant yellow. Now for some reason at the moment, I keep wanting to paint my minis with blonde hair. I don't know whether this is my subconscious telling me to dye my own, but I really hope not. Xantry Dust is our base coat for this, applied with, as usual, a couple of thin coats. The detail on his hair is pretty shallow, so I'm going to have to be quite careful here not to obscure it with too much paint. Rakkar flesh will be used for our highlights and for picking out those raised areas. Now I wasn't too happy with the skin tone at this point, so just mixing some Rakkar flesh and Cadian flesh tone, I added a real final highlight to all those flesh areas. Picking out the raised details of the face and the upper cheeks, I also added some to the upper parts of the hands and fingers. Once the hair had dried, I then added a wash of Reichland flesh shade to provide some definition. For the base of the Mini, I'm going to get the Rhinox hide back out again and give the whole base a pretty liberal coating, being careful to try and avoid getting any on his boots. Now for the other iconic part of this model, the Pip Boy. Now often you'll see the Pip Boy in a nice military green colour, but after a bit of looking I found an awesome off-white bone colour that I particularly liked, so I decided to try and replicate that. This can be achieved nice and simply by a layer of Rakkar flesh and then a little wash with a bit of Agrax Earthshade. I had to be careful not to get anything on the screen at this point though, which on a model this small was a bit of a challenge in itself. For the screen, I'm going to use Vallejo's dark green as a base tone, then adding in a bit of Escorpina green. I'll glaze a little into the centre of the screen to provide a bit of a glow. A quick wash with Nuln Oil on the screen, and then some pure Escorpina green for some writing, and then we're into our finishing touches. A dry brush of Steel Legion Drab over the base will pick out all that texture and give us the impression of some nice mud. Then because I can't have any minis without a black rim on the base, a Baden Black will finish it off nicely here. Now in Fallout 4, most of the areas you travel to are actually quite grassy. It's set quite some time after the bombs have dropped, so obviously it's had time to grow back. So to replicate this, I'm going to do a little mix of some standard green flock and a couple of the Gamers Grass green meadow tufts. Mixing these up will give an impression of it being more wild than a cultured grassy area. Using PVA glue as my adhesive, I'll scatter some flock onto the areas, and then using a spot more PVA, I'll attach a couple of strategically placed tufts. And there we go, it's all done. I'd normally suggest a good coat of Tester's Dull Coat just to finish this off, as being used on a board game it's going to have your greasy fingers all over it, and this will help prevent any of the paint from wearing away. So there we go, pretty simple paint job, but definitely one that I feel is going to improve the immersion of the game and it's going to look considerably better when on the tabletop. Now obviously not all board games are going to come with playing pieces like this that we can do this with. Something like Monopoly maybe, you can get away with it, but it's so iconic now with just the straight metal pieces that it won't really quite have the same effect. But for games that do have these pieces, then really it's no real different to you painting up your favourite Games Workshop models ready for use on the tabletop there. So over the coming few weeks I will be painting up the rest of the minis from this box set. If you want to see what I do with the other ones, then please just let me know. I could potentially do a small series on painting these ones up. And to be honest, having painted this, I'm really starting to look at the Fallout Wasteland Warfare minis a little bit more. So expect maybe a couple of videos coming up in the hopefully near future. So if you enjoyed this video, then please let me know and give it a thumbs up. If you can come up with any other ideas for improving the immersion in your board games, then again, please let me know. Drop it in a comment down below. Be interesting to hear other people's thoughts. As always, hit that subscribe button down below if you don't want to miss any further uploads. And remember guys, if all else fails, spray black and start again.